Welcome to this demonstration of deploying Cohesity's Data Platform Cloud Edition on AWS. In this demo, I'm going to showcase the procedure for deploying a Cohesity cluster from the AWS Marketplace. I will start the demonstration directly from the AWS portal by going into the EC2 services and showing the AMI image that is going to be utilized to deploy the Cohesity control VM, which is basically the appliance which is used to deploy the Cohesity cluster itself. Here you can actually see the AMI ID, which is provided for customers whenever they're going to utilize or perform a deployment of Cohesity on AWS. So here we have some of the characteristics, some of the information with regards to the image itself. Then I can go into the instances section to launch that one particular instance once you've been given access to. By selecting on launch instance, I then will have to basically find the AMIs that you have been given access or privileged to access. In this particular case, I will provide the AMI ID, which I saw before. And here, as you can see, the Cohesity control VM shows up. Simply select that particular option, select the type of the t-shirt size per se, the types of deployments that will be utilized on AWS. Not necessarily, doesn't have to be really big. And here you can proceed with the process. You can list the number of instances that you would want to deploy here. Obviously we want one. And all of these components that are displayed here are applicable to your VPC and your configuration specifically within your AWS account, and some of those characteristics that are applicable and are very unique to your particular environment. So as you can see here, I'm just simply going through the options available, how I'm going to assign IPs, the particular roles and those things. After that, I'll review and launch the particular instance to begin the deployment. One of the things we always recommend is to configure connectivity between your appliances or your instances which are in the cloud, to use the securest form of authentication. In this particular case here, you can see that we can use different key pairs, but you'll see that what I will be using as part of the demonstration, just for this particular demonstration, I'll utilize a password, but it's always recommended to utilize the SSH private and public key approach to keep things in the most secure fashion possible. Now you have a chance to look at the instance as it's being launched. This is something that will take a couple of seconds or even minutes. Once the instance is fully up and running, as you can see here, listed by the green button, you'll be able to identify it at the bottom of the screen, or you might already even know it, the IP address that you're going to utilize to connect to that particular instance. Now, obviously, we're going to utilize a terminal session to connect to the instance to then proceed with the deployment of the Cohesity cluster. In this particular case here, as you can see, I've listed the authentication, the credentials to gain access to that particular appliance, which is already running in AWS Cloud. Provide the particular password. And remember, as I said before, utilize a SSH key whenever possible. This is just for the purpose of this particular demonstration, but the highest level of security and authentication is always recommended. Now, once you've gained access to the appliance and you're successfully logged in, I'll have a chance to look at the structure of what's stored within the appliance. And there's a couple of directories that actually contain a couple of items, particularly some tools and some things that will be utilized to facilitate the creation of the cluster. So if I do a list, you can see that there's a data directory, which predominantly is the one that we want to utilize, the one we care the most. Within that directory, there's another subdirectory called AWS, which contains some of the files which are going to be needed for the deployment of the cluster. Specifically, they contain the cluster config parameters JSON file. Now, if you look at the contents of the JSON file, you'll see here, I'll open it just the purpose for viewing, but I won't display the information that is actually there because it's quite sensitive. So if you take a look at what it is, there's some properties that are applicable to the deployment of the cluster, ranging from VPCs, IP addresses, and some credentials that are required based on your environment. Now, let me provide a bit of explanation and sort of itemize what some of these items are since they're pretty unique and actually special. So at the top layer, you'll see there's some specific properties which are applicable to the subscription and parameters for AWS. The rest are applicable to the appliances, as they're going to be deployed in AWS and based on those parameters. So once we fill out the JSON file with the right information, you'll be able to then start the deployment of the cluster. We do that by going into the home directory within one of the directories, which is part of the structure within the appliance. And you see here, a single syntax, a command that calls out the JSON file will then be executed, and the process for deploying the cluster begins within AWS. You have the ability to look at the status of the deployment. You can come back out to the AWS portal, and under the management tools, there is a feature or a menu for something called Cloud Formation, which basically combines into a single stack the deployment of multiple instances. In this case here, you can see how the deployment is in progress. Some of the components have been already sort of deployed. You can see all of the resources that are being utilized for that particular deployment. And now you're basically able to identify and get to the actual cluster itself. So now that you know the interface, the IP address, which you're going to connect to the cluster, you'll be able to get into a browser, connect to it, and from that point on, once you get past the authentication pieces here, you'll see that the deployment of the cluster has been successful, and you're now ready to proceed with the configuration. And that's how simple it is. Thank you for watching.